so we can post. We're going to post it later. So welcome back. We're going to do lunch and learn. We're going to start every other week. I'll post some dates so that everybody knows them. If you didn't get an email inviting you to this lunch and learn, please send me an email and I'll have your email address and I'd be glad to send out the invitation so that everybody can join us. Where we left off back in June, July, I forgot when, we're taking a look at the books at the close of the Hebrew Bible, at the end of the Hebrew Bible, the section called Ketuvim, various reasons, assorted writings. And the book where we left off is really the right book to start the new year with. It's the Book of Kohelet. And that's what we're going to be learning today and for the next couple of sessions. And then we'll move into Shir HaShirim, and then we'll finish together with the book of Daniel and the Apocalypse, and then the whole world will come to an end and we won't have to have lunch and learn anymore. So welcome back. It's really good to see all of you. And let's take a look at the book we're learning, okay? So the Book of Kohelet is a short book. It's one of the 5 Megillot at the end of the Hebrew Bible. Each one of these Megillot is read at one of the holidays. This one is read on Sukkot. And one of the 3 big questions I'm going to ask you at the end of our conversation is, number 1, do you agree with him? Number 2, why was this led into the Bible? And number 3, why do you suppose this was read on Sukkot? What is its association with the harvest holiday and the happy, joyful holiday of Sukkot? The Book of Kohelet is a very short book. It was written sometime in the 200s, 200 BC, probably 300 BC, and then codified, edited, and added to the Bible in 200 BC. So as Douglas pointed out before, there is a section of the Talmud where a discussion is raised about why it was included in the Bible. By that time, it had been included in the Bible. So the question was not whether to include it. We don't have the notes of that conversation. But the question was they were trying to second guess their ancestors and try to figure out why it was included. And you'll see why soon, in just a moment, why that was a matter of some controversy. You'll see why that was a matter that was even open to question. So let's take a look together at the book. People are looking for it. All right, Alana, if you're coming on, hang on one more second. I apologize. I'm going to stop this
record.
There you go. Here's Kohelet. Now, the book is called in English Kohelet because that's the name of the guy who wrote it, or at least how he identifies himself in the very beginning. It's called in English Ecclesiastes, which of course means religious matters. And the unique character of this book is that it is the most frank, most direct, and I think in many ways the most honest treatment of the question of the meaning of life, which is a question all of us ask at one point or another. I was just at a funeral this morning, and it's certainly something we ask there. Very rarely in world literature does someone take on this question so directly, certainly not in Jewish literature. I mean, look, where do you find a chapter that says, here's the meaning of life in the Torah, or even in the Talmud? There's 135 pages of Sabbath law in the Talmud, and nowhere do you see a section that says, here's the tractate on the meaning of life. But that's Kohelet's problem. And I'll tell you in just a moment why it's his problem. But first, let's read the beginning of the book, shall we? The words of Kohelet, son of David, king in Jerusalem. So he's identifying himself, or the editor is as an editorial comment, identifying him as son of David, king of Jerusalem, which would make him Solomon. Now, why he's identifying himself as Solomon is a very good question. Traditionally, the book was written by Solomon. We know that's not true because we can look at the language of the book and see that there's all sorts of Persian and Greek words filtered in the language, which means that the book was much later. The book was probably written during the 300s, long after King Solomon is dead. King Solomon dies in about 920 or something BCE. So this is 600 years after King Solomon is dead. But he's going to identify himself. Now, in the ancient world, you were allowed to do that. Don't try this now. You'll get in big trouble. But you can write a book and say, this is written by, and then identify a famous author. And there's a reason specifically why it has to be King Solomon. You'll see that in a few moments, okay? Utter futility, said Kohelet, utter futility, all is futile. It's one of these happy books that starts with that language. Now, the word for futility here is a very important word. The word is hevel. Hevel. Hevel, hevalim. Now, hevel literally means something which anyone who lives in Los Angeles knows very well. It's the weather report that we get about 300 days a year. It's the weather report that says early morning, low clouds and fog, burning off by noon. That's literally what the word hevel means. Hevel means mist. Hevel means fog. Hevel means something which isn't around permanently, which has no reality. It has no staying power. It doesn't have any substance to it. It's going to pass through. And this is going to be Kohelet's big problem. Kohelet's big problem is, and we'll see it in just a moment, life, everything we know in the world is impermanent. The impermanence, the transitory nature of human existence, the fact that we are passing through the world and nothing we do leaves a real mark that's indelible, that time erases everything. That's his problem. Hevel hevalim, it's all just mist. None of it has any substance. None of it has any real staying power. What real value is there for a man in all the gains he makes beneath the sun? Now, that's a very interesting statement. The word value here, you see that word? In Hebrew is yitaron. Yitaron really is an accounting term that means what's left over. The profit with an F, P-R-O-F-I-T. When I subtract my liabilities from my assets, when I subtract my expenses from my revenues, what's left over? Kohelet asks an accounting question. When I make an accounting of my life, and I put all the things that I devote myself to, and then I subtract death, I subtract time, I subtract the nature of the world as an impermanent place, what's left? Is there anything left? Is there anything that we can say, this is worth it? This makes my all of my efforts worth it? That's going to be Kohelet's question. Everybody see that? That's going to be Kohelet's phenomenally interesting and important question. Okay? Now, this for a second. Who is he? Well, let's talk about something, a little bit of history for a moment. We started out as people who lived in tribes. And our tribes entered the land of Israel with Moses and Joshua, and we settled into towns and villages. For most of human history, most human beings lived in small bands, in tribes. And then when we settled and invented agriculture in about 10,000 years ago, 10,000 years BC, more than 12,000 years ago, we invented villages. Now, if you live in a village or if you live in a tribe, there's a certain quality of life to that. The tribe, the village is bounded. It's us and not them. There's a very strong sense of us and not them. There's a very strong sense of this is who we are. This is what we are, right? And because we're us and because we know each other and because we're familiar to each other, because we have a sense of solidarity together, your whole life, in a certain sense, is recorded by the village. Your life is recorded by the village. You're known by the village. There's no strangers in a village. Everyone knows everybody else, and everybody knows everybody else's parents, which is why there's no real crime in a village, other than certain crimes of passion, because you can't get away with anything. Everybody knows who you are. Everybody knows your parents. And any accomplishment that you put out in the world, anything you achieve in the world, is going to be remembered and recorded by the village. So the question of memory, the question of does anything survive death, the question of does anything survive time, is not a question in the village, because I know that things survive time. I contribute to the life of the village, and that keeps the village alive for my children, and they contribute for their children, and we're all part of a chain of generations. What happens when a village person moves into the city? What do you encounter in the city? Well, what you encounter in the city is a very different quality of life. In the city, there is urban anonymity. There's enough people that we can become anonymous, that we're not known. In fact, an ethic of anonymity is part of living in an urban environment. Let me ask you an embarrassing question. You live in LA. How many of us know our neighbors real well? How many of us hang out with our neighbors, right? You know, LA is the town where everyone has these giant block walls in between their properties. We want privacy. I don't want my neighbors knowing what goes on in my house. I don't want to know my neighbors. There's a sense of privacy, but privacy is bought at the expense of anonymity. And in a city, you have anonymity, which means, first of all, you can get away with stuff, but the worst problem is there's nobody there to remember you. How many times have you heard these news stories where somebody was found dead in their apartment and they've been there a while? I mean, think about that for a second. Somebody dies in an apartment and it takes days or weeks before somebody discovers that they passed. What a sad thing. A life disconnected from a social context, a life disconnected from a circle of other lives, a person's not missed enough that anyone went looking for them, right? No one missed me. I didn't show up to Minion, or I didn't show up to the bowling league, or I didn't show up to lunch or to work, and no one missed me. Now, that kind of a life cut off, that's the urban life. And Kohelet is a book of urbanity, of urban life. It is a book of people who are in the village, and in the village, they had a sense that my life mattered because I contribute something to the flow of generations. But now that I moved to the city, no one knows that I exist. What can I do in my life to give me back a sense that my life matters? That's Kohelet's question. That's Kohelet's question. So now the great question is, what do you do? How do you live that way? Kohelet is part of a class of guys who were wisdom teachers. These are wise men, presumably of an older age, who took upon themselves responsibility to train and tutor the children of the nobility. So he's a wisdom tutor. And you can imagine him being followed around by a gaggle of young men who are the children of privilege. And it's his job to teach them ethics about how to live their lives and to talk to them about what they believe. I mean, think about Socrates and his circle, right? He's a wisdom teacher. And the question he's taking up with them is, gentlemen, what pursuit in life is worth pursuing? What can we do in life that matters? How does one live one life so that one leaves a mark in the world that really matters? And when he looks into the world, he says to his young charges, boys, I want you to realize something, right? One generation goes and another comes, but the earth remains the same forever. The sun rises, the sun sets and glides back to where it rises. Southward blowing, turning northward, ever turning blows the wind. On its rounds, the wind returns. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place from which they flow, the streams flow back again. So he talks about one generation, the sun, the wind, the streams, and all of them are circular. You see the circularity here? When I look into nature, and I look at the way that nature is organized in circles. And when I see that nature is organized in circles, all such things are wearisome. No man can ever state them. No eye has enough of seeing, or ear has enough of hearing. Only that shall happen which has happened. Only that occur which has occurred. There's nothing new beneath the sun. And in case you didn't get it, and this is typical of Kohelet, he gives us this beautiful poetic ovation, or this beautiful poetic overture, rather. A beautiful poetic overture, and then he follows it up with a prose version of the same thing. Hey, look, sometimes there's something of which they say, hey, this one's new. Nope, It occurred long ago in ages that went by. The earlier ones are not remembered, so too those that will occur later will no more be remembered than those who will occur at the end. Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist, pointed out that the circle is the most popular mythological symbol in all of world culture. You find circles everywhere, right? You find circles. Buddhists have prayer wheels. Native Americans build their villages in circles. The Christian story is all about circles. It's the God who was born and lives and is resurrected, and the halos around the angels. We have round challahs on Yom Tov. It's all circles. Why is religion so convinced that circles? What is it about circles? Well, here's the point. If I look into nature and I see that time for nature is a circle, there's birth and growth and maturity and decay and death and then rebirth. The story of the phoenix, the rebirth, the story of the Christ, the rebirth, birth, growing, maturity, decay, death, and rebirth. The circle erases death. Every death is an invitation to rebirth. Every death prepares the world, prepares the soil for rebirth. My trees grow. This time of year, the leaves are falling. They're going to fall into the ground. The ground will mulch, and out of the mulched leaves will come new growth next spring. That's the way nature works. And if you understand time as a circle, that's something very comforting. There's no such thing as death, because death is just a preparation for rebirth. Only one problem with that. The problem is that works on the level of the species. It doesn't work on the level of the individual. An individual is born, grows, matures, decays, and dies, and is gone and isn't reborn. Children are reborn, right? Children are reborn. By the way, if you want to see this writ large, the reason I know this is my son, when he was a little guy, now he's an adult, but when he was a kid, his favorite movie in the world was The Lion King of Disney. It was such a favorite movie that he forced me to buy him the cassette. Remember when cassettes were popular? And I had it in my car. And every morning we would drive to school and we would listen to the song. And the song, if you ever look it up, it's a wonderful song. It's by Elton John. And the song from Lion King is Circle of Life. Circle of Life. And that's the story of the Lion King, right? The father, it's Hamlet, basically. The father's killed by the uncle. The uncle rules. The son doesn't know exactly what to do. The son comes back. The son supplants the uncle and takes his father's throne. Death gives invitation to rebirth. The king is dead. Long live the king. The problem is that works for the species. It doesn't work for the individual. And because it doesn't work for the individual, there's nothing new under the sun. It's comforting to think that death is a prelude to rebirth. But the problem is that if life is a circle, if history is fated to repeat itself, if every generation is fated to repeat the generations before, the experiences of the generations before, the successes and the failures, then there's nothing new under the sun. It's only when you straighten out the circle into a line that two things happen. Well, three. Number one, the individual now exists, because an individual can do something to move the line forward or move it back, and something new can be added, novelty can be added. But the price of that, of course, is death. Now, remember the Torah. What is the Torah? The Torah is a road story. We start in Egypt, we end in Canaan. That's not a circle. That's a line. One of the powerful messages of Judaism, and if you want to read a whole book about this, there's that wonderful book by Thomas Cahill called The Gifts of the Jews. And what he says is the Jews were the ones who invented the idea of time not as a circle, but as a straight line. Because if time is a straight line, then and each one of us has something unique to contribute to the journey. Each one of us has a way of moving the journey forward. We have a way of measuring progress and regress. And each one of us can add something brand new to the world mix. Time as a line, not as a circle. But the price of that is that if time is a line, each one of us dies along the way. right? And we leave for our children to continue the journey. And death is very real and isn't erased by the notion of the circle. That's what Kohelet is all about. He sees life as a circle. He sees death as the ultimate end. He realizes that for individuals, that means that nothing we do really matters, because our kids are fated to make the same damn mistakes we made, right? And that's his lament. And the question he's going to, I'll be right with you, Andy. The question he's going to ask is there anything I can invest my life in that will get me out of the circle, that will give me a way of impressing myself upon the world that is indelible, that's unerasable, that's not going to be wiped away by time or by death? Is there anything I can do which makes a difference? And therefore, is there any way that I can achieve immortality and escape the trap of circular time and death? And that's going to be his great question. Okay. All right. So far, we've now gotten the first verse. We've now gotten through the first verse of Kohelet. Andy, what's your question? Please unmute.
So I really love the definition that you gave about life and how life is a circle, and then there's, and how we talk about the Jewish faith, and it's the story in the Torah is a line. So I'm going to challenge that,
okay,
because the line that you're referring to is actually a chain. So as pieces, lives, as they go away, when new children or kids or next generations come in, they replace those links so that the circle still stays complete. So it is a line where there's a beginning part and an end part, but it continues on as a circle because of each life. There's something new added to it. And that was how someone presented it to me once. And after I've done that, I'm like, wow, so you've basically given the complete paradox of, yes, you're right on both, so that's what I wanted to share.
Yeah, that's a wonderful observation. And that what's so beautiful about this book is that it invites us to think about, well, maybe it's not a circle, maybe it's so you said a chain is a great image. That's a wonderful image. Here's another one. It's a spiral. So that we do go around. Look, we all have to deal with the certain elements of existence that all human beings deal with. We deal with birth, we deal with growth, we deal with mating, with finding partners, we deal with work, we deal with good and evil. But maybe if we're smart, when we come around again, we bring some of the wisdom of a previous generation. And therefore, instead, that's why my father once pointed this out. How come you make round challahs yontif? It's not round, it's a spiral. That was my father's brilliant observation about this. So we have to decide, a chain is one way to look at it. A spiral is one way to look at it. You could say it's a line, but it's a wavy line, which means that there are some generations that just don't get it, and some generations some generations that are down and some generations that are up. I've been thinking a lot about my generation. There's a song like that. And my generation grew up in a bubble. We were born into prosperity. We were born into a world of opportunity. Some people say we screwed it up, but we certainly enjoyed it. And when you talk about the generation before me, they were the greatest generation. They had to deal with the Great Depression and the Second World War. And my kids' generation had to deal with climate change. So maybe it's taka, like a wavy line. These are all these wonderful images, and I so appreciate it. Thank you. This is great. Stanley, good to see you.
Good to see you. I think that it is a spiral, which is an expanding circle. A spiral can always also be a decreasing circle. But if you look at it as an expanding circle, then there's more and more that we've achieved, and we're going in the right direction. But yes, we keep going around and around. That's inevitable.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, these are all, what happens is, the test of this is, what does it add to your understanding of time? So if you take Andy's idea of a chain and you go look outside, what do you see? I mean, it's a very interesting idea. And if you take a look at a spiral, what do you see? How does it change your vision of life? That's That's the great question of these wonderful images. Okay, Douglas, hi.
If you plot it, though, there seems to be a linear sense of progress. Our moral understandings have changed over time. The fact that we're doing this on this sort of method is something that that's new under the sun. Our understandings of right and wrong, our understandings of of power and the use and its abuse, to Kohelet, the idea that a woman would have an idea that could be respected and a leader of the community doesn't exist. That exists today in our mind. Doesn't that reflect some sort of progress or something?
Well, so that's a great question. Is there real so you're raising exactly the right question that he would want you to ask. Is there such thing as moral progress? Right? I go into Starbucks and I order a cappuccino. When I was a kid, you could not find a cappuccino in Los Angeles. You had coffee. On the other hand, when I was a kid, coffee cost a dime a cup, and my cappuccino cost me $5.25. So one wonders whether there's moral progress, right? I really appreciate the question. I mean, can you see progress? And if there's progress, then in what sense are we fated to repeat the mistakes of before? Or are we given the opportunity to make our own mistakes? How does this work? And these are wonderful questions. These are wonderful, wonderful questions. But let's take a peek at Kohelet. We're going to end a little bit early today because it's our first one I want to get used to. I don't want to burn anybody out. So let's take a quick peek back at Kohelet again. Ready? Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. How's that? Can everybody see that? Okay. Kohelet was king in Jerusalem over Israel. Now, I told you before, he's pretending to be King Solomon. Why? Well, for a really simple reason. King Solomon was known for two things. He was the richest man in the world, and he was the wisest man in the world. In the wisdom tradition, Solomon is sort of the godfather of the entire wisdom tradition. In traditional Judaism, he is said to be the writer of Song of Songs, Proverbs, and Kohelet. And the tradition is that he wrote Song of Songs when he was a lusty young man. He wrote Proverbs when he was a mature man thinking about the world and offering his wisdom to his children. And he wrote Kohelet when he was getting old and a little bitter. Because Solomon is the archetype of wisdom, but he's also the richest man. You see, and if I'm really going to do these experiments, you have to have both qualities, right? I set my mind to study and probe with wisdom all that happens under the sun. Oh, yeah, an unhappy business, that which God gave men to be concerned with. And I said to myself, I've grown richer and wiser than any that ruled before me in Jerusalem, but my mind is zealous, and my mind has zealously absorbed wisdom and learning, right? And the question is, he has to be both richer than and wiser, because you could say, for example, that if I had Bill Gates' money, I would know the meaning of life, right? So he has to have Bill Gates' money, but you also have to be as wise as Solomon to realize it. So he needs both qualities, and Solomon is unique in that sense. Plus the fact that he's the king, which means that he has a certain amount of material power in the world. All this I tested with wisdom. I thought I could fathom it, but it eludes me. The secret of what happens is elusive and deep down. Who can discover it? I put my mind to studying and exploring and seeking wisdom and the reason of things, and to studying wickedness, stupidity, madness, and folly. Now, just so you understand, I've rewritten the book for you here. That's real chutzpah, I know. I mean, who rewrites a Bible book? I haven't touched any of the words, but what I did is I put it in a different order. So the Roman numeral refers to the chapter, and the Arabic numeral refers to the verse. So this is chapter 1, verse 12, and this is chapter 7, verse 23. You can see how that works. Now, the experiments that he's going to do 4 experiments. And in each experiment, he's going to take something that people invest themselves in, something people pursue, something people do, and see, does that qualify as an activity which might get me past death? Does that qualify as an activity that might be that for which life was created for? That's his test. So as I said at the beginning, one of the questions is that really the test? I mean, is a meaningful life a life that leaves some indelible, some immortal impact on the world? Is that really the essence of the meaning of life? But hold that thought as we go through it. So what's the first thing that most people spend most of their time trying to get the most of? Answer: pleasure, enjoyment, fun. Fun is not a word the Bible knows, by the way. Fun is an American word. And when you think about what the word fun means, try translating fun, right? Fun is such a powerful word in our culture. And I know that's what he's reaching for, even though he doesn't have the word. We have the word, fun. Let's go have some fun. You know, my daughter was a kid, she went to Magic Mountain. That's an amusement park, right? And she said, Abba, we waited 3 hours in line for this particular ride. I said, how long was the ride? She said, the ride was 90 seconds long. I said, 3 hours in line you waited? What? Why'd you do that? She said, oh, it was fun. It's an interesting thing what people count as fun, right? Right. So here's what he's going to do. He's going to go look at fun. He's going to go look at pleasure, enjoyment, right? I said to myself, come, I will treat you to merriment, taste mirth. That too I found was futile. I ventured to tempt my flesh with wine and to grasp with folly while letting my mind direct with wisdom to the end that I might learn which of the two is better for men to practice in their few days of life under heaven. So I had folly and I had wisdom, and I watched to see which is a better way to live my life. I multiplied my possessions. I built myself houses and planted vineyards. I laid out gardens and groves in which I planted every kind of fruit tree. I constructed pools of water enough to irrigate a forest shooting up with trees. I bought male and female slaves. I acquired stewards. I also acquired more cattle, both herds and flocks, than all who were before me in Jerusalem. I amassed silver and gold and treasures of kings and provinces, and I got myself male and female singers, as well as luxuries of commoners, coffers and coffers of them. Thus, I gained more wealth than anyone before me in Jerusalem. In addition, my wisdom remained with me. And here's the line: I withheld from my eyes nothing they asked for and denied myself no enjoyment. That's the American consumerist dream. What's that? Remember there was a game show that you could go shopping in a market and you can take as much as you want, right? It was the prize of the game. The American consumer dream. I withheld from my eyes nothing they asked for. Remember, he was married to 900 women. That too is part of his fun, right? Rather, I got enjoyment out of my wealth, but that's all I got out of my wealth. All right. Tell me about pleasure. Is pleasure a way to be? Is pursuing fun, pursuing pleasure, pursuing enjoyment, pursuing is that a satisfying way of life? Does it work? And this is the audience participation part of our game. So who has an answer? Is that a way of life? Okay, David, you go first.
Well, I've been thinking about something as you've been talking, because the answer, of course, is, oh, that's all fine, but no. And what I've been thinking about is, as you know, Rabbi, I participate with groups of people, different groups of people, and we are on a journey together to learn. We share what we've learned with one another, and out of that there is an evolution. And part of so I think strikes me listening to you that one of the answers is about community, which I think you would like very much, obviously, since you had a community, but that there are people that are no longer part of that community. In other words, they passed away, but they've contributed to me. And they've been contributed to by other people who were part of that community who passed away before them. And my experience, although my vision is very limited, that is, I'm not going to be around long enough to know, is that there is some kind of evolution there is some kind of forward movement with the community as a whole. And that's not, doesn't speak directly to your question, but the answer is no. I can get all kinds of pleasure, but that doesn't equal anything compared to what I'm talking about that I gained from being part of this community, as well as the community of my marriage. There's the issue of community is what comes up for me.
Okay. So what we have is, so notice what he doesn't do. David's very, very astute in this. He doesn't condemn it. He doesn't say the pursuit of pleasure is evil. He doesn't say the pursuit of pleasure, of happiness, of enjoyment, of physical happiness. He doesn't condemn it. He's not an ascetic. He's not asking us to practice any kind of self-denial. What he's saying is, it's okay, it's good, but it's not going to answer my problem of survival. And what David points out very rightly is that there's something missing. He's all by himself in this. There's no social context to Kohelet. He doesn't seem to have a family. He doesn't seem to have a spouse. He doesn't seem to have anybody with whom he shares any of this stuff. The statement we just read, I didn't deny myself or my eyes anything they wanted. But that's not, I mean, for most of us, when we earn money, that's not what we spend it on. We tend to spend it on other people. And he doesn't seem to understand that. All right, what else? If you were talking to a kid, to a teenager, to a college student who said to you, uncle, auntie, tell me what life is for. Is hedonism, the pursuit of pleasure, a way of life? What is the problem with hedonism as a way of life? Douglas, go ahead.
It has its place, but it is a part, but it's not a significant whole. If
Okay,
it's
why
an
not?
end unto itself, it's meaningless, but it should be part of something that is you. For the same reason he's not in his speed. He's not going to that cave and burying his head in the sand.
Okay.
So, it has a place, but
It has a place, but it's not the whole of life.
it is
Okay.
a place, but not the place.
Okay, good. So it's not to be condemned. It's not sinful to seek your own happiness or enjoyment, but it's not going to answer the problem of what life is for. Now, what I want to suggest is, first of all, one of the reasons for that is that there's a fundamental contradiction. And here's the fundamental contradiction, right? Think of what happens when you go out to dinner one night and you happen upon a new restaurant in the neighborhood. And you've never been there before, and it's brand new. Almost nobody's been there before. And you walk in and you sit down and you have a lovely meal. It's just a really nice meal. Service is good, food is interesting, menu is creative, bread is fresh. It's a really nice night, okay? So you call your friends and you say, hey, we discovered this new restaurant. It's wonderful. Come with us Saturday night. So you make a reservation and you go back to the restaurant with another couple Saturday night. What's it like?
You've just described diminishing marginal utility.
What's it like the second time? It's
Not the
never as
first.
good. It's never as good, right? The waiter's never as friendly. The food is never as interesting. It's never as good because it doesn't have the quality of novelty. It doesn't have the quality of surprise. In order to get back the feeling that you had the first night, you need a bigger hit. This is the logic of addiction. In order to get the same high, you need more of the drug, you see? And then you need more of the drug, and then you need more of the drug. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that moments of enjoyment are wonderful. They really are, but they're moments. And when the moment's gone, all you have are some memories, right? Gee, that was a nice meal in the restaurant, but nothing really lasts. It doesn't stay with you in any way. It doesn't have any real lasting effect. And lasting is what this is all about. It has a nice, so what he says is, I got enjoyment. I did. I enjoyed all of the moments of my life, but that's all I got out of my life. I got enjoyment, but that's all I get. So don't expect a great meal, a wonderful bottle of wine, or a fun evening at a party to be the be all and end all of life, It's a wonderful thing to have. But it's not life. It's not, it doesn't last. And the other interesting thing, it's an escape from life. I mean, most of us, watch a little TV at the end of the day to escape from. Fun is an escape. It's not an engagement with life. It's an escape from life. So if fun is not the way of life, if hedonism, pleasure, enjoyment is not the road to happiness, well, what is? And his next experiment is going to take us into wealth, which is something that a lot of people spend a lot of their lives looking at. But for that, I think we're going to stop now. Any comments or questions before we conclude today? Because we're going to pick this up. So I think today is the 20th, right?
Gotta do it every week.
So we will pick this up on the 3rd of November, okay? Agreed?
Same login?
Same login. I'll send it out again. If anyone didn't get it, let me know. I apologize to those who are watching on Zoom late, but we had a Zoom, a Facebook problem today, but we'll try to get it fixed. And I look for, I'm going to hope that someday this year we can come back in person. But until that time, it's wonderful seeing all of you. And I wish you a really, really good day. So go out there and have fun, but don't make that the full purpose of your life. Okay?
Fun is when the Bruins win, and if you lose, it's not so much fun.
Yeah, well, let's hope the Dodgers play well today. Take care.